The other side, Wide Sargasso Sea and Jane Eyre. So these are two novels. Wide Sargasso Sea is written by Jean Rhys. At the moment, we're not going into the detail of the writer, where she belongs to or where she's from. And we're not also talking about Bronte, but these two works, Wide Sargasso Sea and Jane Eyre. Jane Eyre is written by Charlotte Bronte, and you have already read one of the Bronte's novel in your course. Wide Sargasso Sea is written by Jane Rhys. Rhys is a Creole, and she knows about Creole background. And we, in Jane Eyre, we have a story of Bertha Mason. Bertha is a Creole who has been married with Edward Rochester, who is a white man. He went there to marry Bertha Mason, and to get money. Of course, it was a trend at that time that the people who could not earn much money in West or Europe, they were sent to the colonies in order to get married with Creoles. In this way, they make their fortune. So we see that how things go on. The crucial question White Sargasso Sea as a work of art might seem to pose is whether it can stand and be judged alone, or whether, in the view expressed by Walter Allen, it is only a triumph of atmosphere which does not exist in its own right, as Mr. Rochester is almost as shadowy as Charlotte Bronte's Bertha Mason. So, this is the argument that is being developed in this essay, but we are not more interested in this argument. But we'll see that why Bronte preferred writing Wide Sargasso Sea. Jean Rhys' own comment. This is the comment of Jean Rhys. She says that she seemed such a poor ghost. I thought I would like to write her life. You might have noticed that in Things Fall Apart, when we say that it was a response to Heart of Darkness, and we realize that the natives were not given the due status of being human. They were considered creatures. Similarly, in Jane Eyre, we see Bertha Mason as a poor ghost, a creature. She is not considered human, but a half human. So this intrigued uh, Jane Rhys to write about the life of Bertha Mason. What was the wrong in her life? Was it hereditary disease that was concealed from Rochester, or it was the circumstances that should be held responsible for her downfall? So she says that she seemed such a poor ghost. I thought I would like to write her life. So this is why she wrote White Sargasso Sea, because she wanted to give life. She wanted to write her life, not the end of her life. She wanted to tell people what kind of life she led and how she was tortured both by her community and by Rochester or Edward, her husband. So this was one of the reasons that she wrote um, White Sargasso Sea. You see that we would come across Antoinette. Antoinette is the main character uh, in White Sargasso Sea, who is the prototype of Bertha Mason. So might seem to lend support to Allen's generalization, suggesting as it does that Rhys expended her whole creative effort upon an act of moral restitution to the stereotype lunatic Creole heiress in Rochester's attic. So the basic aim was to give voice to Bertha Mason, because she was deprived of that voice in Jane Eyre. Certainly, Rhys's Antoinette, Bertha, who tells Edward Rochester, Edward would be the character in White Sargasso Sea, a prototype of Rochester. So there is always the other side, always. is given a passionate voice to make the other side felt. So it means that the other side was given voice which was not given in, say, Jane Eyre. And what was the reason? Probably the reason behind not giving voice to creoles was the demand of Victorian audience or readers. Because in Victorian age, people would like to listen about the animalistic side of Creoles and Africans and Caribbeans and all people from colonies, because they thought that the people living in colonies are uncivilized, they don't know the ways of life. So, in order to meet the need of or the standard of the readers, the writers try to incorporate the things which were appealed by those readers. So, that's why she was not given probably that was one of the reasons that she was not given a voice. So there is always the other side, always is given a passionate voice to make the other side felt. Yes, of course, when you read Jane Eyre, you don't feel like uh, criticizing it for Bertha Mason. But when you come across Jane Eyre's White Sargasso, you are tantalized to look into the life of Bertha Mason. You start saying thanks to Jane Rees, who could give you the other side of the story. Half of the story, half-cooked story, has been presented in Jane Eyre, and which has been completed by Jane Rees in White Sargasso Sea. So, passion twice to make the other side felt. Yet hers still only one side, and so it might be argued of her creator's earlier novels between the wars that Rees was more concerned to do fictional justice rather to her women than their men. White Sargasso stands out as her most balanced novel in its even-handed treatment of the sexes. Her inward presentation in the second part of the novel of Rochester's viewpoint, complex but not shadowy, is unmatched in her earlier work, and its strength is enhanced by our contrasting recollections of the Jane Eyre. We would see that how beautifully she has given voice to Edward Rochester, because it is not the one-sided story. She has given the two-sided story. In order to write the life of Bertha Mason, she has not deprived Rochester of his life. He is also of the view, his point of view has equally been presented in White Sargasso, which is otherwise in Jane Eyre, where Bertha Mason's viewpoint has not been mentioned. Only Rochester's viewpoint was mentioned, and he was, concluded as an innocent man who was um, corrupted by the environment of Caribbean or the Creoles. So Creoles were responsible for corrupting his soul. So this is how here we see still she did not assume that her readers' remembrance would be anything but dim and perhaps composed of stereotypes. So this is what I was talking, that Victorian readers were expecting the same treatment of Bertha Mason, um, the way Bronte did in Jane Eyre. Rochester recalled as a passionate, but ironically moody man, because at that time it was expected of a man to be moody, his life belighted by the secret existence of the mad wife in the attic, she being little more than a figment of the Gothic imagination. Though the compassionate Bronte asks that we pity her, there is no effort to understand. There is no effort to understand. This is very simple. When you read the text of Jane Eyre, you would say that nobody tries to understand Bertha Mason because she does not have life. She is not considered as a human being but a creature. Only in the brief part 3, the climactic passage set at Thornfield. Thornfield is a place of Rochester. is some specific knowledge of Jane Eyre assumed. This part is introduced by Grace Poole. The woman reader of Jane Eyre may remember. Grace Poole is the attendant at home. May remember as looking after the confined heiress. Consistent with her approach, Rees gives more credibly human substances even to this minor character. Bertha's sullen jailer being presented as another woman as victim, sinking low that she may sink no lower. So she also gives equal weightage to Grace Poole, who is neglected in Jane Eyre also. So her treatment of women in her novel is very balanced. The passage implicitly echoes that which closes part one, and the security Toinette feels in the cold refuge of her convent is contrasted with outside. The mad woman and her jailer are unwittingly sisters beneath the skin. They were sisters because they shared the circumstances. She was poor, and um, Bertha or Antoinette has become bankrupt also. And in part three, we see that perhaps unlikely that even reader of Jane Eyre will recognize that the passage in which Antoinette, holding her red dress against herself, asks if it makes her look intemperate and unchaste, as that man said, calling her infamous daughter of an infamous mother. You see, uh, when you try to link or categorize the actions of an individual with some other person, it means that you are not giving or you're not doing justice with that person. So she is branded as infamous daughter of an infamous mother. Closely echoes Rochester's word in his self-explanatory account to Jane of his relation with his first wife. This is not only an unusually explicit attempt to humanize our understanding of Bertha. So this White Sargasso is an attempt of humanizing our understanding of Bertha, but also that of Rochester, for his words are transferred in Ree's novel to that man. Antoinette's stepfather, Mr. Mason, in his virulent disapproval of her relationship with her half-caste cousin Sandy, the remainder of the part three allows to see Antoinette in Sanderism not as a maniac melodramatic finale, but as the inevitable tragedy. So you would see when you would read the part three, you would come to know that how she is branded as unvirtuous or corrupt, and how this person, Edward, starts believing in the stories concocted by Sandy. So the fiery West Indian places. So sometimes it happens in Jane Eyre that we come across passages that tell us that it was the West Indies or the place of Bertha's origin that is responsible, because everything is wild there. So that's why that nature of being wild is present in Bertha Mason. So the fiery West Indian place of Bertha's upbringing and her Creole blood are the essence of her lunacy. So she is mad because of her family, or she is mad because she took birth in West Indies. So this was the concept that is available to us in Jane Eyre. So this was not digestible by Jane Rees, and she would give life to or voice to Bertha Mason, that the place of her origin or the blood of Creole is not responsible for her circumstances, but it was the attitude of the people living around her and the attitude of her husband are responsible for her downfall. Later, she is my Indian Messalina, a byword for debauchery, while Rochester own confessed um, peccadilloes go under the milder name of dissipation. Of course, the blackening of the dehumanized creature from the West Indian past readily serves Bronte's purpose. Why? Because of winning sympathy for the deceived and deluded Rochester from both Jane and those of the Victorian audience prone to racial prejudice. And now at this place you would understand that in fact it was this racial prejudice in which Bronte was living in. This prejudice was responsible for making this story the way it is portrayed in Jane Eyre, because the readers were expecting this prejudice in that novel. So this racial prejudice is quite replete in Jane Eyre. which was warded off in wide Sargasso Sea by Gendries. Radical though she undoubtedly was in her frank portrayal of passion in this novel, Charlotte Bronte observed certain righteous limits. So she has also, it's a good work of art. Also, we cannot deny. So, uh, but still, there are instances that can be objected. It is true that profound pity ought to be the only sentiment elicited by the view of such degradation as Bertha's, and equally true is it that I have not sufficiently dwelt on that feeling. I have erred in making horror too predominant. Mr. Rochester indeed lived a sinful life before she was insane, but sin is itself a species of insanity. The truly good behold and compassionate it is it as such. So Bronte herself felt that sin is the responsible for insanity. When somebody is lunatic, it means that he has committed some sin. So this was the mentality of Bronte in which she wrote this novel. So she had not sufficiently realized Bertha's humanity, and she made a figure, and this figure was considered mere a ghost. In his account, Rochester complains that Bertha's descent from idiots and maniacs through three generations was concealed from him, but also that her gross, impure, depraved vices prematurely developed the germs of insanity. So, since she was impure, she was gross, she was depraved, and she had certain vices or some bads in her, and that was the germ or the base of her insanity. So, this was the mentality in which the character of Bertha was portrayed. Thus, Bertha must be both congenitally insane and yet depraved before that madness shows itself. A shaky diagnosis, but convenient, or else it would have been possibly possible to pity her, as indeed before she knows all Jane once beseeches him to do. Essentially, of course, our pity is needed for Rochester. So when we read Jane Eyre, we offer our pity for Rochester. We have some sympathies for him because he was the person who was taking care of a lunatic or a person who is mad, and it is totally a burden on Rochester, and he's very loyal to him. So we feel pity for him. But when we read the story in White Sargasso, we come to know that it is not the truth. It is one side of the story, and there is also another side that has to be highlighted. So you see that there are some other works which have been mentioned in this article also. We are not interested in these articles. As I have argued earlier, that she has not blackened the character of Rochester, but she has given due weightage to his character. She sets herself not only to humanize the West Indian exotic, but also to portray subtly and sympathetically its effect upon Edward. So she balances, she tries to balance, and she is not one-sided. She, in order to highlight Bertha's character or Bertha's life, uh, does not mar the character of Edward or Rochester. Rather, she portrays his character with a fine balanced. So this is the similarities or comparison that you can draw. The development of Weese's narrative, where it centers upon Antoinette, bears striking resemblance to Bronte's portrayal of the younger Jane, because we can see that Jane and Antoinette has got similarities. Both heroines grew up fatherless and emotionally threatened by those who take charge of them. They live much within themselves and in their imagination, made fearful by emotional and physical insecurity. Jane is an orphan, Antoinette virtually one, losing her father in childhood and seeing her mother marry again, infatuated only to become insane after the burning of their estate by the emancipated Negroes in the disturbance of the late 1830s. The real life of both as children is driven inward by maltreatment or indifference. Life is the nightmare. Only in dreams and fantasy do they find relief. In fact, Jane's experience is such that she might have recognized much in Bertha's suffering at Thornfield Hall. Her agonies in the Red Room, where her aunt confines her, correspond to Bertha's incarceration, while her temptation to a superstitious doubt of her own reality, as when she peers in the looking glass, in Ree's novel by the looking glass motif, linked with Antoinette, who constantly needs one to be reassured of her identity. So the identity crisis is very much common in White Sargasso Sea by Jane Rees. So there is a similarity. You can read this episode of similarity between Jane Eyre and Antoinette. So we see that this thinking, the very thinking that sin is a species of insanity, the sin is responsible for someone going mad. So Bronte's moral forcing, despite her casting of Jane as a seeker after liberty and self-determination, is reductive and constricting. Nowhere is this more clearly shown than in the novel's dehumanizing of Bertha, the hapless creature for whom her own experience might have taught her more than a perfunctory plea for pity, soon set aside by Rochester. So you see that how she was neglected, or she was deprived of her identity, and she was not looked into, or she was not considered as a human being to be understood. So in response to that, Rees wrote clearly of the racial prejudices that must have limited Bronte's reach, and creating in the affinities between her Antoinette and Bronte's Jean a subtle implicit comment on the shortcoming of Jane Eyre. So this is the comparison that you can draw between the two heroines, and you can easily point out some of the flaws in Jane Eyre that were removed by um, Jane Rees in White Sargasso Sea. So basically, this is the rewriting. White Sargasso Sea is a rewriting of Jane Eyre. The story was rewritten in order to show the other side of Creoles, because Jane Rees herself is a Creole, and she knows Creole more than anyone else. So that's why she wrote her story herself. The way Achebe write the story of African Sarigbu, because he is from them and he knows more than Conrad and other writers of the West. So this is writing back. So this rewriting is one of the themes of post-colonial writers, because they try to um, correct the existing discourses or colonial discourses on Africans or Creoles or the colonized. So she also makes Antoinette a narrator in part two, because she gives her life, or the version uh, of her life, which is missing in Jane Eyre, because Bertha Mason was not given a voice. She was not made a narrator, and we don't know about her life. Only we know that she is the daughter of some Mr. Mason, who has come to claim something and tell the stories, false stories about Bertha. So this is the comment of Jane Rees. When I left college, I was sent out to Jamaica to espouse a bride already courted for me. In her portrayal, Edward, a milder name than a formidable Rochester, is an uncertain, perhaps emotionally crippled young man. So emotionally crippled young man, it means that he does not have life. He has gone there only for to earn money, and he was there to get married with a rich Creole so that he could make money. And he was useless person, a useless child of his son, his father. And you would see when we would read the novel, we would come to know that how he writes letters to his father, telling him that how he is making fortune at that place. So here, one of the instances, one of the quotes from White Sargasso. I thought these people are very vulnerable. How old was I when I learned to hide what I felt? This is quite Western, because those people are very good at hiding their emotions. But these West Indians or the Creoles, they are unable to hide their emotions. They whatever they have in their mind or heart, they just express it. So he is telling his hypocritical side of Westerns. How old was I when I learned to hide when I felt? I was very small boy, 6'5", and earlier it was necessary, I was told, and that view I have always accepted. This is one of the extracts that we have taken from the letters that he has written to his father. This is one of the resemblances that we find in Jane Eyre and White Sargasso. At the beginning of part 3, Graceful remembers Mrs. F. So Mrs. F is in White Sargasso, whereas Mrs. Fairfax in Jane Eyre. Reproving her for her unwillingness to accept Edward's proposition that she look after his mad wife with this plea for sympathy. I knew him as a boy, I knew him as a young man. He was gentle, generous, brave. His stay in the West Indies has changed him out of all knowledge. He has grey in his hair and misery in his eyes. Uh, so all this is something that is related to life of Edward and how the local circumstances are blamed for his shortcomings in his character. I knew him as a young man. He was gentle, generous, brave. His stay in the West Indies has changed him out of all knowledge. He has grey in his hair and misery in his eyes. Don't ask me to pity anyone who had a hand in that. Another side of the core, of course, and a partial one. But by this time, Rees has allowed Edward claims upon our pity. We have seen him steel himself against pity, fearful in his own disintegration and thus violate his own soul and destroying Antoinette's. His future does not concern Jean Louis, though he could have none in the Bretonian manner, but his relationship with Antoinette has been developed into a many-sided and complete study of tragic incompatibilities retrieved from Charlotte Bronte's workshop floor. So this is the other side of the story that has been knit closely in White Sargasso Sea, and this is the reason why we came to know that this is the reason why Rees took up pen and she rewrote the story of Bertha Mason, who was deprived of voice and identity in Jane Eyre, but she skillfully gave life and voice to Jane Rees in her novel White Sargasso Sea. Right? And this is all. If you have any questions so far.
No, sir.
So now you understood what is the concept, why she wrote this White Sargasso Sea.
We will read novel as well.
Asya, if you could speak a bit louder so that we could listen to you.
So are we going to read novels as well, these both novels, or just comparison them?
Yes, probably you are right, but we are unable to make out what you said. Someone else who wants to contribute to that? Do we have Soon Yi around?
Yes, sir.
Yes. What is your take on it?
Um,
Why did she rewrite the story of Bertha Mason?
I think he wants to mention something, respond to the Jane Eyre. in the opinion of feminist and racial prejudice, maybe.
Hmm. Yes, she tried to incorporate what was missing in Jane Eyre. So basically, she wanted to give voice to Bertha, or she wanted to give life to Bertha because her life was not exposed in Jane Eyre.
Yes.
Uh, right. Okay, any other question?
Excuse me, sir.
G.
Sir, why there is no Asian writer included in our syllabus who wrote back to center?
Unfortunately, we don't have the writers who wrote back to the centers because our themes are different. Our themes are largely the split identity or working on the liminal space. So Asian writers, they are not writing back to the center. They are more appropriationist and ambivalent than the reactionary native reactionists. So we find this thing missing in Asian writers because most of the writers they are sitting in the Western camp, like Mohsen Hamid, like Nadeem Aslam. There are many names if you enumerate them, but they are enjoying the status in Western academy, so they pick themes which are suitable for the academy as well as for their need. So in this way, if they are reactionary nativist, they may have to face the brunt. We have one novel which was written by Ahmad Ali, Twilight in Delhi. So that novel highlights the brutalities of the colonizers, but that cannot be regarded as a post-colonial because it was written in colonial time, somewhere between 1930 and 35. So, uh, but he raised the issue of colonization, and he resisted, or he recorded the resistance against colonizers. So that can be considered in this way. When we are talking resistance as a post-colonial theme, in this way we can consider Twilight in Delhi as a post-colonial text written before post-colonization. Hassan Mumtaz, right?
Okay, sir.
Any other question?
So what does this title indicate?
White Sargasso Sea basically refers to a place in West Indies, a sea in West Indies, which is these seas and forests are considered wild, too wild, because the landscapes are also considered as bewitched or magical. So, in order to bring into limelight their places and in order to ward off that bewitched, entitled position of such places, she has taken up this wide Sargasso Sea as a title.
Thank you, sir.
As we have indicated in this article, we have read that West Indies itself is responsible in making Rochester a corrupt man. So, if a place can do that, so what to talk of the people? That's it.
Yes, sir.
Okay, then I'm just leaving you for now, calling it a day. See you, inshallah, in the next class with the text. If you have the text available with you,
No, sir.
No, sir. Sir, if you have
uh,
PDF or soft forms, please do share
why?
with us in the
Yes, White Sargasso Sea probably is not in PDF. So I'll share the pages we will discuss. So side by side we'll be sharing and you will be making it a book.
Okay, sir.
Okay then, take care and Allah Hafiz.
Allah
Allah
Hafiz,
Hafiz.
sir.
Allah Hafiz.
Allah Hafiz. Nice first.
Allah Hafiz, sir.